The Matthew books. Matthew, Tell Me About Heaven, a first-hand description of the afterlife by Suzanne Ward, published by Matthew Books. Part 2, Nirvana. Communication with Earth. Suzanne, do you know everything that happens on Earth? Matthew, all the events you could call public as opposed to private personal events, yes. We see them occurring, we see the thoughts behind them, and we see the darkness or the light around both the events and the thoughts. Trained observers are assigned to monitor all happenings so that when help is needed and is within the pre-birth agreements, assistance can be rendered instantly. Suzanne, I know from our sittings how quickly telepathic communication can happen, and I'm wondering how you protect your private thoughts. Matthew, Mother, what you're wondering is how the swiftness of telepathy affects your private thoughts. There are two issues here. I've told you about the privacy shielding that protects us from interruption unless there is mutual desire for contact. A feature of that same shielding allows our private thoughts to be undisturbed. As for your privacy, we must be invited into your thoughts, and when we are, contact is instantaneous. Now, you're concerned about what constitutes the invitation. Universal law does. When I am in your thoughts intently or only casually, lovingly, your energy reaches me and I respond. When your thoughts are solely on another interest or activity, including those of personal physical nature, then your frequency for receiving from this realm isn't operating. There's no way I could intrude because your energy in those times is denser than when you're dealing on a higher spiritual level. The energy attunement of the higher level is required for communication between this realm and Earth. So you see, Mother, you do have complete privacy of thought and activity when you want it. Suzanne, I'm very glad to know that, Matthew. Hearing probably isn't the best term for my end of our communication. How would you describe it? Just telepathic? Matthew, well, just telepathic still is a wide range of communication with realistic and powerful effects. As you know, the receiving aspect enables individual voices with personal inflections to be as real as if they are being heard on Earth. Actually, there is sound, but your auditory range is so small that rarely does anyone hear us, even when we're speaking right beside him. There are other dimensions of telepathic communication that you have experienced, but just aren't attributing to it. Simultaneously with hearing me, you see my punctuation and underline words, or words in all capital letters, that I want to emphasize, and you see the images we send. You feel the energy of Ithaca, Esmeralda, and others as well as mine. You feel me hug you. Twice you have smelled the lovely fragrance I've sent you. So you see, the energy of telepathy encompasses all of your senses, except taste. I don't think we're going to be able to manage that one. Suzanne, you're right, dear, and I was being short-sighted in my question. What I really need is an explanation of how I receive your messages. Matthew, it's an energy transfer. You hear my thoughts impressed upon your consciousness. The pulsing of my thoughts takes an actual form, a thought form, that makes an impression upon your clean, receptive brainwaves. The energy source is light that is electrically switched to pulses that are transferred at your level into your word vibrations. The pulses don't start out as words, but as vibratory rates indicating intelligence blips. There is continuous interaction, but Always my thoughts precede your comprehension. My thoughts trigger words stored in your memory, and my thoughts carry a coding for choice. When your word is suitable for my purpose, I accept it, but when it's not, I correct it, as you know. Suzanne, Matthew, I don't understand a word you said, except that when I goof, you get on my case. Betsy asked me how our communication works, and she probably won't understand your energy transfer and pulsing explanation any more than I do. Can't you simplify it? Matthew, give me a moment to think, please. Thank you. Betsy, I shall give you an analogy of how I communicate with Mother. Consider a tire tread as my thought, and the smooth, soft earth as Mother's consciousness or receiving area. Imagine the clear impression of the tread upon the earth. The tread mark is my thought impression upon Mother's consciousness. Think of rain as Mother's vocabulary, and imagine some of the rain falling into the grooves of the tread marks, filling the space up to the level of the earth around those marks. The rain doesn't change the form of the impression, it only fills the space. That filled space can be considered my message, my thoughts filled with Mother's words that were appropriate for conveying my meaning. Occasionally, there is a slight extra impression in the grooves, say where a pebble is, and it causes a tiny deformity in the otherwise perfect tread mark. It's in those tiny degrees of deviation that my thought impression and Mother's vocabulary produces a word that isn't my choice. When my intent isn't changed by that word, no harm is done. In fact, it's not up to me to choose every single word, or we wouldn't finish one message in a full day. But if Mother's word choice is contrary to my meaning, I correct it. Mother, did I do all right on that analogy? Suzanne, yes, thank you, dear. That makes it much more understandable. Sometimes I feel as if I'm thinking of all the words being used, so naturally I wonder whether it's you or I coming up with the information. Matthew, you don't interfere with my thought forms by thinking of appropriate words, Mother. I don't order up the words. You're responding to my pulsing by making them available for my use. It depends upon your words to fill in the grooves of my thought forms with sensible sentences that let you comprehend what I want to convey. I pulse my intent through thought impressions, and your energy, aided by your vocabulary, memory, and conscious assistance, lets the words that best express my intent come to your mind. It seems to be simultaneous, but there is an infinitesimal lag. Suzanne, then why don't you speak the same way I would if the intent is the same? Matthew, because the pulsing is with my thoughts, not yours. I need only your word reservoir, not your sequence of words or your finite selection of words. Suzanne, well, I never knew evolvement even existed, so where did that come from? Matthew, your familiarity with the syllables is enough. Suzanne, okay. When we talk outside of sittings and I haven't prayed for protection as I do when I'm at the computer, am I still protected from dark energies? Matthew, absolutely you are. Everyone on earth is totally protected during our communion with them. Many of us are simultaneously visiting or communicating with our beloved people there, whether you realize it or not. And to endanger any of you by seeking such contact is unthinkable. So automatically, a protective shield is in force. When our energy connects with yours, the shielding is instantly wrapped around you, giving protection and communion passage. When the visitation ends, the shielding is withdrawn automatically as the energy connection dissipates, and our etheric bodies are then separate from the physical bodies of those whom we visited.